you for joining us for today's NILE webinar. This is Brianne Van Dyne, the Education Manager for Immunize Nevada, and I will be today's moderator. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items. First, if we should become disconnected for any reason, please call right back and we will continue. Second, please locate the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box and we will address those questions at the end of the presentation. Lastly, if you have requested nursing or pharmacy continuing education credits for today's webinar, please make sure you complete the survey in the post-webinar email. The email will be sent out by the end of today, and all CEUs will be emailed out within the next week. Before we begin, I'd like to provide a little disclaimer. Immunize Nevada's NILE webinars are made possible by the generosity of speakers who donate their time and expertise to benefit the coalition. The expectation and goal is for our community partners to gain knowledge on immunization-related topics through a non-branded, unbiased presentation. I'd like to now introduce our speakers, Patti Wukovits and Alicia Stillman. Patti is a registered nurse and a meningitis advocate who lost her 17-year-old daughter, Kimberly, to meningitis B in 2012. She has since started the Kimberly Coffee Foundation to improve awareness of meningococcal disease and the vaccines available to prevent it. Alicia is a meningitis advocate who lost her 19-year-old daughter, Emily, to meningitis B in 2013. She has since started the Emily Stillman Foundation to improve awareness of meningococcal disease, the vaccines available to prevent it, as well as to encourage organ and tissue donation. Patti and Alicia's foundations have partnered to form the Meningitis B Action Project. I'd like to now officially turn it over to both of our presenters. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Hello, it's Patti. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes. Oh, good. Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I first really want to start with a very short video. We have two short videos to show you today. This is the first one. It's called Meningitis B Shatters Dreams, and it'll give you a feel for what we're going to talk about.
I'm going to be a star on Saturday Night Live.
I'm going to be a pediatric nurse.
I'm going to write the next great American novel.
I'm going to pursue my love of art and study at WashU in St. Louis.
But then, meningitis B struck. Our dreams never did come true.
We all had the meningitis vaccine that was available at the time.
And that helped protect us against 4 of the most common groups of meningitis here in the U.S., A, C, W, and Y.
But at that time, there was no vaccine in the U.S. for meningitis B, so we didn't have the chance to be protected against it.
But there's good news.
Today, there is a vaccine available to help protect against meningitis B.
Ask your doctor about it.
Because 16 to 23-year-olds have an increased risk because of how we socialize.
For example, at crowded concerts or at parties.
Where we can share a drink.
Or a kiss.
Basically, we share saliva. Know that when meningitis strikes, it can happen fast.
Meningitis can lead to death, sometimes within 24 hours of being perfectly healthy.
I can't imagine thinking it's okay to knowingly help protect myself against only 4 of the 5 vaccine-preventable groups of meningitis.
That is not okay. Help make your dreams come true. Get vaccinated with both vaccines, the one for ACW and Y, plus a separate shot for MenB.
Do it because you can.
Hello, it's Patti again. I just want to tell you, I know that she just mentioned some information about us, but I'd like to give you a little bit more. I am Patti Wukovits from New York. I'm the Executive Director of the Kimberly Coffee Foundation, and I'm a wife and a mom of 2 of my own children, and I have 2 stepchildren. I'm also a registered nurse, and I'm currently enrolled in an RN to BSN program, and I will graduate this June. My partner is Alicia Stillman, and she's from Michigan. She's the director of the Emily Stillman Foundation. Alicia is a wife and a mom to 3 children, and she's an accountant, and she's currently in school as well. She's working on her MPH. We each continue to do our own work through our own foundations, myself in New York, Alicia in Michigan. But knowing that there's power in numbers, we decided to join forces, and 1 year ago we launched a joint initiative from both foundations, and it's called MAP, Meningitis B Action Project. And as you know, 5 years ago we each lost our daughters too soon to meningitis B, which is now vaccine preventable. And we'll each tell you a little bit about our daughters and our daughters' stories. My daughter, Kim, was a 17-year-old high school senior in her last 2 weeks at school, and she was looking forward to graduation and prom. But first, I need to tell you a little bit about Kim. She was a really silly kid. She was confident. She was kind. She was compassionate. She had a vibrant smile, as you can see. She was so silly. She was very funny. She was confident. She was mature. Her favorite thing in the world, though, was to be at the beach with her friends, of course, and to have her toes in the sand and the sun shining on her. That was the perfect day for Kim. She knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. Her dream was to be a pediatric nurse, and she was very excited because she had been accepted to a nursing program at a local college on Long Island. So in 2012, she was in her last 2 weeks of school, and she was looking forward to what everyone does, their high school graduation and prom. She came home one afternoon with body aches and a temperature of 101. I called the pediatrician, and he said, bring her in the next day. It sounds like she may have the flu, and give her some Motrin, which I had already done. I asked her, did she have a headache? I asked her, did she have a stiff neck? The thought of meningitis did go through my head. No to both of those. No headache, no stiff neck. And she really was fine the rest of that day. I slept in her bed with her that night, and then we woke up the next morning. I said, okay, now how do you feel today? She looked really okay. And she says, Mommy, everything hurts me from my eyelashes down to my toes. And she said, I feel like my ankles are bleeding. So I pulled back the sheets. I saw on one of her ankles there was the start of some petechiae. And from then on, she went downhill very, very quickly. I rushed her to the emergency room, and within 5 minutes, they drew blood cultures and IV antibiotics for hanging, and she was put in isolation. The doctor in the ER pulled me aside, and she said, Mom, we really think that your daughter has bacterial meningitis and that the bacteria have invaded her blood. I said, no, that's not possible. My daughter's been vaccinated. Both of my kids are up to date on all their vaccines, and including bacterial meningitis, so it can't possibly be that. I later learned that the MenACWY meningitis vaccine that Kim received didn't protect her against meningitis B. I had never even heard of meningitis B, let alone meningococcemia. Kim was septic, her organs were failing, and she quickly progressed to septic shock. She had a purple rash covering her entire body, and her extremities were bright purple, and they later turned to black. If she had survived, she would have been a quadruple amputee. She went into cardiac arrest and was intubated, and that was the last time I got to speak with my daughter. I never got to talk with her again. But she still had brain activity, and we had hope. We thought she was going to turn the corner. We just thought it was going to, turn out much better. On the 9th day, she was officially declared brain dead. She had no blood flow to her brain, and I had to make the hardest decision in my life to remove my 17-year-old from life support. No parent should ever, ever have to bury their child. It's really important to know how aggressive this disease is. My daughter, Kim, had excellent medical care. She was treated actually less than 24 hours from her first symptoms, and she still couldn't fight this disease. In 2012, I gave her the best protection that I could by giving her the MenACWY vaccine, but I couldn't protect her against meningitis B because we didn't have a meningitis B vaccine at the time.
Hello, this is Alicia Stillman, and I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm going to start with sharing the story of my daughter, Emily. Patti did a great job of saying what my background is and how we got together. Two moms that from different states that our paths never would have ever crossed had it not been for this one horrible event in both of our lives that brought us together. My daughter, Emily, was 19 years old. She was a sophomore at a small liberal arts college in Michigan called Kalamazoo College. Her number one dream was to be on Saturday Night Live. She loved to be on stage. She was an actress. She loved to sing, but she was very, very funny. Of course, my husband and I told her, you got to have a plan B. So in addition to theater, her major was also psychology. But the truth of the matter is she was very funny. She really, everybody gravitated to her. She could make you laugh just by faces she would make, let alone the voices and the stories she would tell. She might have made it on Saturday Night Live. She called me one night in January of 2013, and she said, "Mom, I have a headache." I said, "Oh, you're probably getting the flu." It was about 10:15 on a Thursday night, and I told her, "Why don't you take some Motrin?" She said, "I don't think I'm getting the flu." She says, "I had 2 big tests today, and I studied really hard last night, and I was up so late, and you know how I get when I don't get enough sleep." So we decided she would take the Motrin, and we'd see how she felt in the morning. And that was the last time I would ever end up hearing her voice. She went to sleep. She woke up a few hours later, and she said to her roommates, "My head hurts. It hurts really bad, and it hurts different than a regular headache. I think I should go to the hospital." And her roommates, she lived in a suite. They live in a dormitory for the first 2 years at this particular college, and her roommates took her to the hospital. Emily walked into the hospital. She walked in carrying her backpack, a textbook, her computer, her iPad. She wasn't going planning to die. She was going planning to get treated for a headache. And because that was her symptom as she presented at the hospital, they did treat her for a migraine. But her headache didn't start to go away. In fact, as the hours progressed into the early hours of the next morning, her mood began to change. She began to get a little bit combative, I was told. I was never called because Emily was 19 years old. By the time I was called early the next morning, I was told that Emily had been admitted during the night, to the hospital, and that they wanted me to get to the hospital right away. I was about 2.5 hours away because she had been admitted with bacterial meningitis. My first comment is, no. She can't have bacterial meningitis. My daughter was vaccinated for bacterial meningitis. In fact, I remembered that her year was the year. I didn't remember that it was different from my previous daughter, but I did know that her year she had a second dose of the meningitis vaccine, which we will describe later on in our talk. I didn't know yet that there was ever such a thing as MenB, and that my daughter was only partially protected. So I, for 2.5 hours on my way to Kalamazoo, kept begging the nurses station to double check the results because I felt that something was going to go untreated because there was no way she could have meningitis. By the time I got to the hospital, she had lost consciousness. She was intubated. They were preparing her for a craniotomy. They told me that if there was any possibility of her surviving, they needed to lessen the chance of brain damage because the swelling was so severe. She came out of the surgery. She did make it through the surgery for her craniotomy, but she never woke up. The brain swelling never went away, and by the next day we were told she had no brain activity. Most likely she hadn't had any since she lost consciousness because the swelling was so severe. And we had to make that decision for my 19-year-old, otherwise healthy, perfect daughter, that she was brain dead, and we would donate her organs, and we would have to say goodbye. We, both Patti and I, like many parents, thought our girls were protected. We thought as mothers that we had done everything we could to protect our daughters. We had given them the MenACWY vaccine. But in 2012 and 2013, the MenB vaccine was not yet available in the United States. And so our doctors didn't offer it to our kids because it wasn't available. It is now. So what is meningococcal disease? What is meningitis B? Meningococcal disease is a life-threatening bacterial infection that can affect the lining of the brain and the spinal cord, or it can cause an infection in the bloodstream, or both. For Emily, it never went into her bloodstream, so she never got the rash that Patti talked about Kim getting. That's how Emily was able to be an organ donor, because it never affected any of her organs. And as Patti will share, her daughter's organs started to shut down. With Emily, it just stayed in her brain, but the swelling was so severe. This bacteria, there are 5 types of meningococcal bacteria that cause meningococcal disease. It's called Neisseria meningitis. It's A, B, C, W, and Y. It is easy to spread. It is spread through droplets, saliva, throat secretions. It is spread through common adolescent and young adult behavior. Not being careful when they sneeze or cough, kissing with multiple partners, being in close quarters, sharing food utensils, sharing cups. The early symptoms mimic those of less severe infections. Could mimic the flu, could mimic a cold. It involves a headache, a stiff neck, vomiting, a high fever, a purplish rash. I need to stress that not all symptoms need to be present. With Emily, it was only a headache. This disease is hideous, and it can kill in a matter of hours. 1 in 10 will die. Another 2 in 10 will face very debilitating permanent complications like limb loss, brain damage, burn-like scars, loss of hearing.
So why does meningitis B vaccination matter? It's so important that you understand, and I'll give you 5 good reasons. The first reason is, as we've been discussing, if a person hasn't received both the MenACWY and the MenB vaccine, they're not fully immunized against meningococcal disease. They're not fully immunized against the 5 most common groups. So 2 meningitis vaccines are necessary to help protect against the disease. Most have received the MenACWY vaccine, but unfortunately, very few have received the MenB vaccine. The vaccines that are available in the U.S. are TruMember, which was introduced in 2014, and Bexsero in 2015. There's a different vaccine for MenB because it just couldn't, for scientific reasons, it could not be combined with the MenACWY vaccine. The FDA has approved these vaccines for meningitis B in the U.S. for the ages of 10 to 25. It's important to know that the vaccines are not interchangeable. So if a patient starts out on TrueMember, they must continue the series with TrueMember. The same for Bexsero. TrueMember is a 2-dose series given at 6 months, and then given at second dose given after 6 months. And in the case of an outbreak situation or a high-risk situation, they give a 3rd dose for TrueMember. Bexsero is 2 doses, and each is a month apart. The CDC's ACIP has granted permissive recommendation for ages 16 to 23, unless you're at high risk. So why does the CDC advise that 11 to 12-year-olds should receive the MenACWY vaccine at 16 to 20? The MenACWY vaccine, and 16 to 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds may receive the MenB vaccine because of the low incidence of disease. It's a high cost to vaccinate everyone. There's a question about longevity of immunity. There are many strains of serogroup B, and we don't know which ones the vaccine will be able to protect against. The second reason is, and very important, many physicians are simply not talking to their patients about the MenB vaccine. According to a recent study in the Journal of Pediatrics, they surveyed 900 doctors. 49% of the pediatricians and 69% of family physicians have not discussed meningitis B vaccination during their routine visits for their 16 to 18-year-olds. It's also, there have been 2 other recent studies that have come out. One from the University of Minnesota, and this one reveals that parents don't know about the vaccine, which is something that we're well aware of as well. And the CDC just came out with another survey which confirmed what was suspected all this time, that college students are at increased risk. So college students are at an increased risk of contracting meningitis B as compared to the general population, and that includes non-residential students. So as a result of pediatricians not speaking to their patients, parents not knowing to talk to their child's physician about the meningitis B vaccine, and college students being at high risk, we still are in a situation where less than 10% of 16 to 18-year-olds have received at least 1 dose of the MenB vaccine, and only 7% of college students are estimated to have received the MenB vaccine. 7%, and we know that those students are at increased risk of contracting meningitis B. The third reason is meningitis B is responsible for all of the college outbreaks on our campuses of meningococcal disease. All of them. All of the outbreaks have been from meningitis B. MenB accounts for 50% of all meningococcal cases in general in the U.S. among 17 to 23-year-olds. 54.3% of cases in a college study were meningitis B cases, and among those 83 college students, 72.3 were meningitis B cases. The fourth reason. Meningitis B outbreaks are really hard to control, and they do have implications for colleges. There's economic and reputational implications for colleges. 27 colleges and universities have had MenB cases between 2008 and 2018 over a 10-year span. 48% of colleges and universities of that group had to deal with a MenB outbreak. A MenB outbreak can take months or years to be declared to be free from the outbreak. It took the Ohio University 23 months to get control of their meningitis B outbreak. And as you can see, there's a listing of the colleges that have recently had cases of meningitis B. Another reason is, again, it has medical implications, of course, as we know, for a college campus. Meningococcal disease cases and outbreaks on college campuses create significant anxiety and major logistical, financial, and reputational challenges. And these are just a few of the headlines from some of the recent college outbreaks.
And the fifth reason, and the most important reason, is that every life matters. These are kids that are just a few of the kids all over the world that have died. This slide shows pictures of some people who have died and some who are survivors. And you will see by some of the photos that the survivors end up with very debilitating ramifications, loss of limbs and scarring, in addition to very severe neurological issues. Again, MenB accounts for 50% of all meningococcal cases in the United States among 17 to 22-year-olds, and 100% of the college outbreaks since 2011. So we wonder, and we are asking you, why is it not given the attention that it deserves? And that's why we, Patti and I, partnered our foundations to create the Meningitis B Action Project. Our goals with this project are to arm parents and young adults with the information that they need to talk to their healthcare provider about meningitis B and the vaccines that are now available to help prevent it. In addition, we want to encourage the medical community and schools and colleges and all administrators to inform their students, their patients, about the availability of the meningitis B vaccine. And 3, we encourage policymakers to ensure broader access to the meningitis B vaccine. This is not an error that this is a duplicate slide. This is, if you have one takeaway from our whole talk today, this is the most important slide that we have. Many people, very often when I say, are your children protected against meningococcal disease, they'll say, yes, they are, of course. My child had the vaccine, and they'll cite which vaccine they had, and really what it was the second dose of MenACWY. The MenACWY vaccine, which is called either Menactra or Menvio, is given at ages 11 to 12, and then a booster dose is given again at age 16 or 17. We know that the uptake on the MenACWY first dose is good as we're going to get with any vaccine, in the 80%, pretty much across the board, some states better than others. But we know that the uptake on the second vaccine severely drops off for the second at 16, and at that point, they have no more coverage. The immunity has waned. But we know that with 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, they're not coming to the medical practice as often anymore, and it is difficult to keep up with those shots. And that's why we believe that the uptake drops off. And that, I think, is partially part of the problem with the uptake on the MenB vaccine, because the ideal time to give it would be at the same visit that we are giving the second dose of the MenACWY vaccine, just give it in the other arm. The ACIP's recommendation has left that decision-making, has left that that job up to the practitioner and the parent together to have a discussion and make that decision. And what we're finding with these different medical studies is that the doctors themselves don't have that knowledge or don't want to take the time to have a discussion because they consider the vaccine to be optional. And the parents themselves have no knowledge of the vaccine. So what ends up happening is the 16-year-old or the 18-year-old that's there doesn't get the vaccine and they don't get the protection. This is really important. So MAP has fabulous resources that we have available. We can make available for anyone who wants them. We have brochures that are geared towards the parent and separate brochures that are geared to the patient, to the young person. We have one-pagers that really give all the facts that are wonderful for healthcare providers. We have 3 different posters available that are also quite appropriate for any kind of a healthcare provider or a medical community center in any way, or also a university. There are tear pads for when you have the discussion with your patient and you want to remind them for the follow-up. We also have magnets that are available. There's magnets that have the symptom cards are very appropriate and should be placed on dorm room refrigerators to remind the students what to look for. The students need to know what symptoms to look for because they even mimic a hangover. The other magnet we have available is the one that from the slide that we show a duplicate of. It should be on every refrigerator that houses vaccines to know when you draw when you draw the MenACWY vaccine for a second dose, you should also be drawing the MenB vaccine. We have videos that are available to be played in waiting rooms or shared anywhere you want. Our resources are now translated into Spanish, and we are working to translate them into other languages as well. We give interviews across the country. Patti and I work together. We do webinars. We do video presentations. We can be at any event that you would like to educate your audience. This is another video that we have available.
Meningitis. You've probably heard of it. Maybe you've even had a meningitis vaccine. But did you know it takes 2 types of meningitis vaccines to help protect against one of the most common types of bacterial meningitis called meningococcal disease? Few people do. And why does it matter? Because meningococcal disease is pretty easy to spread. Early symptoms can often be mistaken for the flu. It is more common among 16 to 23-year-olds. And the really scary part? It can kill in a matter of hours or cause permanent complications like brain damage, hearing loss, learning disabilities, or limb amputations. So what can you do to protect yourself? Meningococcal disease is mainly caused by 5 types of meningococcal bacteria, A, B, C, W, Y. That is why you need 2 types of meningitis vaccines, MenACWY and MenB. Few people have received the MenB vaccine. Why? It just became available in the US in 2014, and few people know about it. Ask your doctor today about the Meningitis B vaccine. Tell your friends and family to do the same. This message is brought to you by the Meningitis B Action Project, an initiative by 2 moms who lost their young daughters to meningitis B. Get to know their stories and how you can help at meningitisbactionproject.org.
Another part of our project is working with colleges across the country. We are working right now. There are only a few schools that actually mandate the MenB vaccination. Of course, that is our ultimate goal, but we know we're going to be taking baby steps. We want the education provided when the students enter. We want the constant reminders. We want programming available to teach the students and keep meningitis in the forefront of their mind. So if they walk into one of their friends' dorm rooms or they see somebody is under the weather, they don't right away assume it's a hangover or it's a flu. They know that maybe something more is going on and I should get them help. If anyone is on the call from any of the colleges and want to work with us, that is a big part of our program right now. And this is our ask. We have a toolkit available. We have people that we have met in this last little over a year that we've been doing this together, and we can provide the information that you need to be able to take it to your local community. We are working with other parents, some medical people around the country, and students themselves who are all taking our information and sharing it in their own networks and helping to extend our reach. Patti and I suffered a tremendous loss when we lost our daughters, but this is a loss that we didn't have a choice at that time because that vaccine was not available to us. It is available now, and it is so unfortunate that so many people still don't know about it, and we really take it personally to make it our job to make everybody aware. And we'll, at this point, open up for questions to Patti and I, anything that we can answer.
Thank you so much, Patti and Alicia. Before we say goodbye, we do have one question so far, but we'd like to offer a little more time for last-minute questions, so please type those in the chat box now. And while we're waiting for those questions to be typed in, just a couple of reminders. If you've requested nursing or pharmacy continuing education credits for today's webinar, please make sure you complete the survey, which will pop up on your screen when the webinar is ended, or in the post-webinar email. The email will be sent out by the end of today, and all CEUs will be emailed out within the next week. If you'd like to view or share this webinar, the recording will be available on our website along with information for future webinars. Please visit immunizednevada.org/webinars for those details. We have had a couple of questions to come in. The first one was from Patty Chambers. Will the state of Nevada eventually make this a mandatory vaccine? My personal opinion is I sure hope so. I think the work that Patti and Alicia are doing on their end to educate universities and state health systems to let us know or let them know about why this vaccine is so important is definitely an integral part of that. Because of the quote-unquote soft recommendation for the vaccine, we definitely have some barriers there, but I do think that it's a fantastic opportunity for when those patients do come in, like Patti and Alicia had mentioned, for that second dose of MenACWY, that providers and practitioners use that as an opportunity to immunize with MenB. It only makes sense. It's the best measure of protection from this strain of meningitis, and yeah, we sure do hope that we can make some gains as a state in the uptake of that vaccine. The second question is from Cherie Smith. The question is, it is known how long one is protected after receiving the first dose of MenB in the event that a student is not able to receive the second dose prior to going to college.
So I will answer that one. And Patti, jump in if you have something to add to it, of course. It isn't the length, it's the degree of coverage that I would be concerned with only one dose. There is some, I do believe, there is some coverage, there is some protection from one dose. The second dose adds to that protection. So I would get it as quickly as possible, even while they're at school. They don't know the longevity of the protection yet, and that is one of the issues that the ACIP has. But quite often when a vaccination is first introduced, we don't know the length of the protection. We don't know a lot about it yet, and we don't wait to give it a more concrete recommendation. When the MenACWY vaccine was first introduced, it was introduced to be given at age 11. 11 was chosen as a generic age because they felt at the time that that gave the young person the most comprehensive coverage during the time of their life that they were the most vulnerable. And then they realized as they went along that that immunity began to wane around 15. The length of that immunity happens to be about 3 to 5 years. So that's why they began to give that a booster dose at 16 so that they would have the coverage again during the years in their later teens. So not knowing that for the MenB vaccine is not a reason to not give it a more concrete recommendation, but it is a reason to watch the immunity, possibly check titers, and know that we've got to be aware that that may have to be boosted.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question that came in is, what have you seen with parents who are against vaccines, and how have you handled those situations? And I have just a couple of points to speak to on this, but I'll let you guys start.
Okay. Patty, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
I personally have not had too much experience with parents who were against. I mean, I know we all know they're all out there. Okay. But in this scenario, I have not had too many parents that have said this, said to me that they're against vaccination. So that's a good thing. But as I said, we know they're all out there working against us very much.
And I try to not engage. Mm-hmm. There isn't,
exactly.
I lump the against vaccination parents into two groups. One being very much against it and not willing to interpret the science as science the same way. And then the other group may be just a little confused and wants more information. I believe the second group wants a little confused. Maybe they are a little influenced by things they heard or somebody said something to them. So they're truly concerned because they don't want, as we all are, we only want the best for our children. That second group, I feel we can educate. That second group, I feel we can arm them with real science. The first group, they have their own science. They have their own views of what this is, and I choose not to engage.
Mm-hmm. Right, I handle it.
And I think that's
mm-hmm.
I think that's incredibly important to note. I will say that Immunize Nevada has a number of resources related to vaccine hesitancy that we're working to update our website with currently. So please look for that under the Healthcare Professionals Continuing Education tab on immunizenevada.org. And I will second that where our sweet spot is addressing the issues that parents have with vaccines as opposed to trying to convert those who are just adversarial. They're not interested in learning more. They just want to contest what there is. And I think that it's important also to note that really everyone's acting in what they think is the best interest of their child. So we need to approach it from a compassionate standpoint. The science is super important. I think because the anti-vax community does a really great job of pulling at heartstrings and telling stories that are like Patti and Alicia's that are but on the other end, that are incredibly powerful, that we need to do a better job as a pro-immunization community of reiterating the importance of vaccines and really emphasizing the personal stories that are behind those who have suffered from vaccine-preventable diseases, like Alicia and Patti are doing. So please look for those resources on our website. We'll be updating those within the next week. But I think that with anytime we talk about vaccines and educating those about them, we always seem to address this topic, and it's important to know also that by and large, our society in America is pro-vaccine. So long as we're making a strong recommendation for these vaccines, your background, your stance, the fact that you are a medical provider really speaks volumes to parents, and I think that they trust you and your experience. So really to go into any recommendation assuming that the answer is going to be yes, and then not assuming what questions they have, let them guide that discussion.
And you bring up a really good point there, in that it's all how it's presented. You know, I remember when the vaccine was first licensed in the United States and providers first began to carry it, I had a friend who lived in Arizona at the time, and she took her children to the pediatrician's office, and they didn't carry it. They specially ordered it for her after she called every single day because her kids knew my kids were friends with Emily, and she wanted them protected. When the nurse walked into the room to administer the vaccine, the nurse said, "This is the first one I'm giving. I don't know why you want it. Why would you want this vaccine?" And she texted me, and she said, "Are you sure this is the right thing that I'm doing?" So it's all how it's presented.
Yeah, yes, and I'd like to add on that as well. Within the medical practice, there are so many different ways of presenting this to the patients, where they can be met at the front desk with the receptionist, and they can ask a question to them, and the receptionist may not answer it correctly. And we know that, they do answer some questions. And then they get in the back to the nurse. Well, first they see the medical assistant. Everyone needs to be on the same page and give the same message about vaccines in general and, meningitis B as well. Just have the same message throughout the entire medical practice. It's very important because there's really a disconnect.
Absolutely. The last question that looks like it has been posted is this vaccine being covered by most insurances and Medicaid?
Yes, it is. It's covered by most insurances under the well coverage. And as far as Medicaid, the meningitis B vaccines are covered under the VFC program.
Yes, I think your main issue is going to be accessing who carries the MenB vaccine. So it might require a little more legwork on the part of, the parent, if you're a parent and you're looking to receive this vaccine, to find out exactly who stocks it.
Right.
If you are looking as a parent for this vaccine, if your provider does not carry it, they can order it. That's number one. They can specially order it. There is not minimum requirements for them to order. The second place you can look is any travel clinics or any pharmacies. Many pharmacies are now carrying this vaccine and can administer it. And I don't know, the administration of the vaccine often depends on the state rule.
Right.
Yes. I just have one last question for you gals, and it's related to something that you've posted on your Twitter account, and we've come into contact too as a little bit of a rebuttal to this vaccine, and it was the recent Johns Hopkins research that came out that the universal immunization requirements against MenB is not cost effective. And I just wanted you guys, I think you did a beautiful job on your Twitter of explaining why it's important, and I just wanted to maybe emphasize that here.
It's real hard. Go ahead, Patty, you want to go?
Yeah, what I want to say about that is, you know, colleges will have an outbreak, and then they have to vaccinate all of their students. What they go through to do that costs a tremendous amount of money, as we talked about before, causes a tremendous amount of anxiety, and it's not good for it's not good for their reputation. But the bottom line is it's not good for their students, and it's a university's responsibility to protect their students. So at the get-go, they should be vaccinated and not have to scramble when there's an outbreak situation and now have all these vaccine clinics and call everybody in. It's just completely backwards. So, yes, they should all be vaccinated.
Meningitis is difficult to treat. It's treated, of course, with an antibiotic. The sooner you treat it, the better the prognosis is, the better the chance of a less complicated or a fuller recovery, as complete as it could be, is. The best way to treat meningitis is by preventing it in the first place. The cost-effective argument I have a real hard time with. For me, the dollar value that I put on Emily's life as a member of my family, as a daughter that I couldn't wait to have. I waited 30 years to have her, and one that I thought I would see through and she would end up burying me at the end. The dollar value I put on her life isn't the dollar value that the ACIP came up with when they did their cost-benefit analysis. Now, I am an accountant. I am an accountant by education, by training, by practice. I know how to do a cost-benefit analysis. I know when they look at what it would cost each to vaccinate all the people within that age group, I know it's expensive. But I also know that we are still vaccinating for polio. We are still vaccinating for many diseases that we don't see anymore. And we are vaccinating for them so that we don't see them anymore. And I think we have to look at meningitis the same way. I think we have to look at every vaccine preventable disease in a different, not just from a cost-benefit analysis. We have to look at it. It's a life, and that life might be your child or your next-door neighbor, or, to be honest with you, there are no age barriers. It could be you. So we need to look at it like that instead of what is cost-effective, what we're willing to spend, so that you don't end up spending it on a coffin. You end up spending it on a vaccine instead.
Absolutely. I totally agree, and we need to get out of this mindset in the public health and medical community in general that it's our job to be, from a treatment perspective, it really needs to be focused on prevention. So,
I hope at some point the price comes down. I hope at some point there is a way to make these vaccines. Look, I hope that there is not a MenACWY vaccine and a MenB vaccine. And at some point in our future, I believe we will see one that will vaccinate against all 5 of the preventable serogroups. But right now, we only have the 2. So we have to take the imperfections and use them to make them as perfect as we can.
Absolutely. It looks like one last question came in. Will this vaccine eventually be approved for those at risk who are older than 23 years old?
That I don't know about. Will it eventually be licensed? Right now it is licensed in other countries for those under the 10. I will tell you that. I don't know about, it is licensed, by the way, up to 25. So there's 2 years there. I will tell you that both Patti and I have been vaccinated, and we are both, Patti, do you care if I tell our age? We're both 5 years old. We were vaccinated 5 years ago, 4.5 or 5 years ago, both Patti and I. And my 75 at the time year old parents were vaccinated as well. You just have to find a medical provider that's willing to give it off label. They'll tell you it's not necessary. They'll tell you you can't get it. But if somebody sneezes at you, if you share a cup, if you share a glass with somebody who does carry the bacteria that is involved here, incidentally, is a very, very common bacteria that many of us walk around with, a large percent of us walk around with in the back of our throat. We are asymptomatic. It is completely a normal bacteria in us, and it does us no harm. Why all of a sudden it gets onto that one person who start to develop symptoms, why it is so dangerous on them, that they really don't know yet. So when we look at ages, it's really a mixed bag of treats there.
Right. And I will also add, for us, we're going to pay out of pocket whatever it would have taken, to vaccinate our other children against meningitis B. But it is covered by insurance. And even in our 50s, our insurance plans covered it because it's under the wellness benefit. So that's something to keep in mind. One other thing I do want to mention is because meningitis B vaccines are a series, it's best not to wait until right before the student goes to college. So don't wait until August for them to get their first dose. Remember, it can be a 6-month span, depending on the vaccine that's given. Also remember, my daughter Kim was a high school senior. She was almost in college. She wasn't a resident, she didn't live on campus. She lived at home with me, okay? So just remember that it is not just a college disease, and that our kids should be protected while they're in high school because they're just as exposed.
Very good point. Very important point.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Patti and Alicia, for presenting, and to those of you who participated today. That will conclude today's NILE webinar. I hope you guys all have a great day, and please look for the archived version of the presentation and the vaccine hesitancy resources to be posted on immunizednevada.org. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.